moving on to our next session, that is the panel discussion, which will be with the co-founder, CEO, and CTO of Skyroot, Mr. Pawan Kumar, and the co-founder of Dhruva Space, Mr. Chaitanya. So quickly, just about what we'll do is, each of you, Pawan and Chaitanya, if you could take a couple of minutes and quickly brief our audience about your respective companies, and that will follow with few set of questions or few set of topics that we have for discussion. And subsequently, if you also have some questions from audience, we'll take those.
Dhruva Space, like we started off back in 2012. So the primary idea was to privatize the space ecosystem in India, etc. As the first private satellite company, we did like face quite a few struggles being very early to the market. And of course, there were a lot of opportunities that were very limited at the time. It took a while for the new space India to build the investor confidence and of course the market confidence during this time. So personally, I joined the company back in 2018 along with a couple of my other co-founders. The company was originally started in 2012 by Sanjay and two more of his colleagues back then. And after we joined, we closed a round of funding in November 2019. And this gave us a good head start. Like there's been a lot of galvanization of the projects that we were undertaking. So now coming to actually what we do, we provide full stack space engineering solutions. So let's say a customer wants a satellite or a constellation of satellites to do some XYZ activities. So they come to us. So first we build them the satellite, then we help launch their satellite through our partners. Once the satellites are in space, they can either procure a ground station from our end to communicate with the satellite, or they can use the ground stations that we already have established and operate the satellite. So since our fundraise, we have successfully developed a 1U, a 3U, and a quad pack deployer for the satellites. We have deployed a ground station for ourselves and a ground station for one of our clients. And we very recently successfully got tender got accepted by a defense player for supply of a satellite subsystem. So very briefly, this is what Dhruva Space is about. Maybe we can dive in later. Thank you. Pawan, you on the road.
Sure. Thanks for that, Chaitanya. Pawan, over to you.
Yeah. So thanks, Srikanth, and thanks, Chaitanya. So Skyroot, I think pretty much, I think many people know. So we are into building launch vehicles. So what we do is we build rockets for taking satellites into space. So we're developing a rocket series or a launch vehicle series called Vikram series, which can take anywhere from 200 kilograms to 700 kilograms to low Earth orbit. Mainly right now, the first vehicle, which is Vikram 1, is under very active manufacturing right now. And recently, we test fired one of our upper stage engines, and two more stages will be soon tested in the next 6 months. So we basically, what the customers we are target is people who are building satellites and satellite constellations, mainly in the 2022 to 2025 time frame. And we expect, in fact, we are having very healthy conversations with a lot of customers who want to put up satellite constellations, anywhere from 10 satellites to even, people talking about 1,000 satellites into space. And what we offer is like, reliable, on-demand launch to space. That is where like we launch to, whatever orbit the customer needs in a very quick turnaround time. And also like one of the, lowest cost in the world, I should say, for this payload segment. So that is what we are. And both Pawan and my co-founder Bharat, we were also former scientists of ISRO. And we have like a close to a 40-member team. Many of them, many veterans also working with us, and I should say like one of the best teams in the world for building rocket systems. So I mean, we are targeting the launch, first private launch from India, probably end of next year. That's what we're targeting, and also like we also want to see very large launch frequency with time. Where we will be able to launch quickly. We'll build rockets at very fast rate and then launched for the customers, as we see like good potential demand coming from a lot of customers. So that is pretty much it. So what we do is we build rockets for small satellite constellations. Yeah, thank you.
Sure, Pawan. This is helpful.
Yeah.
Thanks, Chaitanya and Pawan, for that. Introducing us about both your respective companies. I think we already started receiving questions in the chat section. But before going to those, we'll quickly jump onto the very basic foundational aspect of space tech, and that is, could each one of you break down the entire space tech, or rather the space industry, the commercial space industry for us, for the audience? Could you break it down into the components? What all does it comprise, and maybe in the second round we look at how do we approach those, or how do we target those as a setting up a business as a commercial entity. So could you just start with that? Maybe what are the different components that one can look at?
Sure. So I'll just quickly go through like different categories or like subsections that are there. So first you have the launch vehicles and the launch support, which of course we have Skyroot over here. So I won't go deeper into it. Then we have satellites and the payloads. So within satellites, again, you have like different sizes of satellites, starting from large to small, and like satellites which are again programmed to be in a particular altitude, and different payloads for the satellites that go in, be it for communication, imaging, or research. And so this is the second segment, I'd say. Then you have the ground segment, where like the receiving station, or like the telemetry, telecommand ground stations, and of course the data acquisition. It could be in any format. Then you have the actual data applications. So the data that's being received, like you've got a lot of applications over here. You've got like for within image analysis, you have for crop insurance or infrastructure tracking, or just then you have weather predictions or navigation support, your GPS systems, of course, and of course the satellite communication. And then you also have a lot of academic and research side of things as well. You have both what's needed for the space itself being developed, the payloads or the subsystems. You also have a lot of there's a lot of pharmaceutical and other microgravity experiments that are going on right now. And yes, there's a segment of consulting and legal, and a lot of regulatory aspects to this as well. So in brief, these are the segments I'd break down space tech: launch vehicles, satellites, the ground segment, the application segment, academic and research, and finally the regulation.
Okay. Would you like to add to that?
Yeah, so I think pretty much Chaitanya covered most of the verticals. So I think, but I'll little bit delve more on the opportunities per se. So I'll divide them even more. Like for example, when it comes to launch vehicles, there is like launching extremely small satellites, and also launching larger satellites, larger communication satellites, which are like over several tons of weight, or launching small satellites, which is few hundred kilograms, or even as low as like a few kilograms in mass. And when it comes to satellites, again, you have like the small satellite constellations, and these large satellites, and also like a lot of data analytics. In fact, the final customers for satellites are either mostly Earth observation, or like that means clicking images from space with the satellites and selling those images to various sectors like insurance, other banking sectors, government, etc., etc. And also communications from space. As we know, there's a lot of hype around internet coming from space. More than like 50% of the world population does not have access to internet, and also almost 90% of the area of Earth doesn't have internet access. So which can be bridged only from space. Space is the only solution where we can beam internet around the world. And that is one very interesting application within satellites, which comes under communication. So one, as I mentioned, it's Earth observation. The other is communication. And also there's a lot of exploration, space exploration vertical also, like sending missions to Mars, Moon, outer space, or experiments in space. So that is also another new vertical which is coming up. And also like we have been seeing a lot of interest from a lot of players who want to take it to the next level, building technologies of the future for settlements in Mars, Moon, etc., or settlement in orbit, or settlement any settlement beyond Earth, right? So a lot of technologies which goes into that, and that requires technologies to be tested in space, over the next few years, which many people are also trying out. So that is with respect to satellites, which is mainly Earth observation, communication, and space exploration. And then data analytics. From the images you create actionable insights. So take the images, you get some useful information out of it, out of them. Like for example, counting the number of cars before let's say a McDonald's or so. That will give a data on how many people are entering and how big is the market growing, etc., etc. And then also like for example, insurance companies using the images for saying how many floors they have built, whether they've so that they can release the money in phases, or like agriculture, a lot of applications in agriculture when it comes to image analytics. So these are broadly most of the verticals within space, and exciting. All of these are very, very exciting for new entrepreneurs to come in, and also very exciting for students to train themselves to enter the sector as well. Yeah.
Right. So when we discuss all these possibilities, where should somebody who's keen and aspiring entrepreneur wanting to enter this space tech industry, what do you think is the starting point? What would you suggest or recommend as a starting point? Where do they start? I mean, they can't build a launch vehicle on day one, or they can't even imagine building satellites, or for that matter, deciding payloads. So where do they start? Can you just guide us there?
You want to go, Pawan? Or
Yeah. Chaitanya, you can start. Yeah.
so, I mean, it all comes down to passion and the interest, right? So there's a very broad range of aspects that you can start with. So to begin with, you don't need a degree in space engineering or anything, but if you can start with an internship in one of the space companies, that should be a good starting point. Or just keep yourself informed of the industry. And once you start doing that, figure out where's your niche, or like where you can start. So some kind of practical experience certainly helps. Again, usually it might you can start with an internship if you're a student, and then go from there. And in fact, like a lot of universities these days are getting involved in various space research activities. So if your university already has a program, that could be a good start. We are working with a couple of universities, BVRIT based out of Hyderabad being one of them. So they already are building some kind of program in-house, and slowly, that's a place to start. And even internationally, or you look at other space programs, even they are pretty open to accepting or like engaging the students, because they're relatively very friendly in that manner. So I'd say yes, get some knowledge and this thing, find where you would prefer to establish your niche, and maybe a little experience of working in the industry certainly helps post your graduation, etc.
Okay. Okay. Pawan, we already have a question for you as well. People are asking, are you open for internship? Is Skyroot open for internships?
Yeah. So we do take interns, but so I mean, like we are very selective because typically we don't take temporary interns per se as per our policy. So what we do is that we take interns whom we can train to become regular employees in the company. So that's where we are very selective. We take very few interns, but many of them are masters. And then we spend some time training them, giving them good work to train them, and then we induct. So we have a slightly different program. In fact, we have like thousands of interested interns who want to join us, but unfortunately, we have a different way of recruiting, which because so we have a minimum limitation on the maximum people we can take intake. So based on that, so we typically prefer to take interns whom we can induct with time. Most of them who can directly get inducted after a few months of joining. Yeah.
Okay. So now, having discussed about where to enter, how to enter the space tech industry, let's also understand how is the space tech scene in India right now. Where do you see it right now? Maybe first we draw a benchmark, and based on that benchmark, we say, okay, India is at 5 out of 10, or maybe 2 out of 10. Maybe if you could elaborate that.
Yeah. Anthony, you want to take it?
No, take it. I'll follow up.
Okay. Yeah. So I think India is right now the fastest growing, new space ecosystem. right now, especially, and also now it will be fueled by the recent reforms coming out of India. So, and we came to know that there's a lot of interest from companies abroad, wanting to set up offices in India as well, and be part of Indian market. So it's like now it's going to accelerate further, and it will be definitely over the next few years, India will be the fastest growing ecosystems. But overall, per se, I think the US ecosystem is like way ahead. We cannot even compare the level at which US is at, and also European ecosystem is quite well ahead. And even Japan has a very good, vibrant ecosystem, space ecosystem, much beyond, much better than India, I should say. And also, like they also have a government $1 billion fund for space startups. So I mean, there is like each government is doing their own ways of encouraging different startup ecosystems. And India, even though it's like the fastest growing, there are like already healthy ecosystems already put up in terms of US, Europe, Japan, a little bit of even Australia. So that way, like there's good growth where India will, because of its good acceleration, it will go and catch up when meet in same level with other ecosystems which I mentioned. So it's a good scope to grow. As I say, right now it's the best time to be a space startup in India, especially after the recent reforms which have come up, which has opened up the sector. Now there is no regulatory uncertainties. There's a lot of interest for space. Naturally, there is always interest for space. Now it's like even the investor interest to space also increases because the government itself is coming forward and saying that we want to promote the sector, right? So that way, like this is the best time in India to be for a space entrepreneur to start anything in space. And like Chaitanya mentioned, there are so many verticals in space. Depending on the interest, people can choose, so we can always start off right out of college, or you can start with an a brief stint with a company, or you can work for a space organization, even government space organization, and start a company. So like that, there are so very interesting space in India, and fastest growing ecosystem, and also very exciting years ahead.
Okay, Chaitanya, would you like to add to that quickly?
I think he covered most of it. Just to give an example, like so NASA is ISRO is up there with most of the space programs right now, but US has SpaceX and all these companies. But in India right now, you can't name any major player and across the space ecosystem. Yes, things are opening up. So hopefully, especially with ISRO being proactively helpful to the companies, I think the growth is going to be good. So that, yeah, we're in good place. Hopefully we'll catch up to other countries soon.
So Pawan, very interestingly, you mentioned that even out of college, you can start up a company in the space tech. Can you list down a few low-hanging fruits, that people could immediately latch on to? Probably, very quickly they can build something in that or find customers. Some low-hanging fruits in the space tech industry.
Yeah, so I think there's nothing like low-hanging fruit in any industry. If you ask me, if it is low-hanging fruit, people will always start grabbing them. So there's nothing like low-hanging fruit. So you need to have your own, thought process. You need to have your own independent thinking to identify opportunities. And if there are low-hanging fruits, automatically the already existing companies would already, wanting to diversify to them as well. So there's nothing like low-hanging fruits in the industry. But as I mentioned, like all industries are open for business. Whether it is launch, satellite, there's tremendous opportunity in all of them. And even in I think easiest way to enter is getting into data analytics. So where you require less resources to enter it. I mean, according to me, I mean, there is a lot of scope, within India to offer solutions in data analytics. Taking satellite data and with them giving actionable insights to various, companies and industries. I think this will be a very hot sector. I think a lot of companies will come up soon, and that is where you can even differentiate. So it's pretty wide that you can target some portion of it. Maybe you can target pollution, you can target fishermen, you can target agriculture. You can target some sector which is of your interest, which is not yet being served in India right now, and put all your thought, bring the team together and start working. So data analytics is something where you need less resources to start, and all the skills are already available in India because a lot of software skill is required. A lot of which is already available in India. But when it comes to launch satellites, pretty tough. But still, I think people are definitely ambitious enough to start ventures in these as well. So low hanging fruits, I mean, no such low hanging fruits, but data analytics show great growth. Yeah.
Chaitanya, would you have any differing views from that?
Uh, I like to give a different view, but unfortunately, I have to agree with them very strongly because data analytics is a sector which is like relatively you can start off without too much of a infrastructure either. And for rest of most of the other sectors today, yes, there's a lot of infrastructure that is required. So yeah, that's a good place to start.
Great. So now that we know that there is a low-hanging fruit, let's also come to a question that's come repeatedly in the chat, and I'll quickly take that question. Uh, where do you find your customers? I mean, we've discussed about the opportunity, we've discussed about the ecosystem itself. Where do you find your customers? You don't find them online on India Mart, definitely. You don't find them on LinkedIn. Where do you find them?
Yeah, it's
Yes, so
actually, yeah, go ahead. Yeah.
space ecosystem is a lot of people know a lot of people. So that plays a big role in getting your customer. So you need to be involved in the ecosystem, know people, and networking is pretty important in that way. Because the moment you're talking about a particular deal, the deal size is pretty large. So someone wants to be your customer, then you need to have established some amount of relationship. At the same time, we've actually got quite a few inquiries inward. And there's also the ISRO actually has been nice enough to direct or connect us to people saying that, okay, so there's a startup, they are doing something in this region, why don't you talk to them? So there have been such cases as well. So yeah, I'd say one, networking, and you do have a lot of space conferences that happen regularly. So be part of it.
Okay. Yeah, Pawan?
Yeah. So I mean, basically, space industry is not such a very large industry. It's something many people know, many people kind of a industry like what Chaitanya mentioned. So it's like not so difficult to find your customers, and also like generally there are like a lot of events happening around the world where you can and where most of the people will turn up. So that's where like we can find your customers, and also like nowadays it's all virtual, so it's like. Even getting connected over LinkedIn or through mutual connects is pretty not so difficult. Yeah.
Sure. So I think a good time to build a marketplace or something like that for space tech. Maybe get all people together on board in one place. Maybe a newcomer can find it relatively easy to find a customer or a supplier or something like that.
Yeah, already such
Or
marketplaces are already existing.
Yeah.
So one of
okay, they
them is
exist.
Sat Search, and also like we're also proposing the government also to create a e-marketplace where all space services, all space companies can put up their products to everybody. So I think it's already there, and also it will keep growing. Such marketplaces keep growing. Yeah.
Okay, sure. So we will now come to the last question, that we will discuss. So that is especially for the young graduates, what are the technical skills, you would suggest that they have in order to be able to join a space tech company? I'm sure the list is very broad, but then at least, pointers to begin with. These are the areas that if you can master, you stand a good chance to be in the space tech industry. Could you just throw some pointers for our audience here?
Yeah, for example, when it comes to our industry, which is the launch industry, so major work happens in three streams. Either mechanical, aerospace, or electronics engineering. So these are the two. These are three main: mechanical, aerospace, and electronics are the three main streams which we look into. So anybody within these three streams who fundamentals are extremely good. Fundamentals being extremely good is very important, and who have this passion for space. I think will be an ideal fit to start with in the business. Yeah.
Okay.
Yes, and coming to more on the space we are in, I'd say yes, mechanical, electronics, and are part of it. There's a lot of cross department requirement that we see. So people who can probably understand slightly broader range of topics, that helps. And of course, on the networking and the communication side, there's a lot of requirement on the software end of things. Again, slightly specific, but these are preliminary requirements. And regulation and law is another area where I see a lot of requirement over there. Over there, it's more of, understanding what the regulation is. So you don't really need a skill set per se, but understanding background and having to work in that space, that certainly helps. Yes.
Okay, great. That's helpful. That's helpful. I'm sure our audience will, take that home. One quick question that I have received here is that typically there is a long gestation period between what you, dream of or what you envisage, and in implementing that, there is a good gestation period that's there. How do you sustain that? There's no revenue that's coming in on a daily basis. How does this happen? The funding is the only source, is it? Or could you just throw some light on that?
Yeah. So that's a very good question. In fact, a lot of youngsters have this thought. How does someone make money in the space business early on? So it's not like a software company where you just put up, for 4-5 people and you start getting customers, starting earning revenue, show some traction, and then get more investments and scale it up. So space business is not something of that sort where you need to spend several tens. For in our case, we spend several tens of millions of dollars to get to see the first rupee, of revenue. So that way, see, one thing is that this is a totally different industry. Not anybody can come and survive and can excel. So it's something where very few people can actually succeed. So it's a pretty tough industry, both in terms of the tech and also in terms of finally achieving all the milestones. Whether it is fundraising milestones or other milestones to reach the final to enter the market, right? So here it's mostly you can rely on being very lean. Something where, anyway, you have to raise funds and you have to burn the money to enter the market. But the only thing to sustain in this box is to be very lean and to be very, very you should probably think the next step because the startups is all about surviving. So you should think one layer ahead to see that even in the worst case you survive. So that way you be very lean with the cost efficiency and you choose the right investors. So there are there's several investors in India and the world. Who have that risk appetite to do something big. So there are investors out there, but you need to choose the really right investors who's going to support you for a very long period of time, right? So choose the right investors and stay lean and be very cost effective are the 3 mantras where you can keep yourself sustainable in a market where you need to spend so much money to just see the first revenue. But once you get there, it's all like it's sunlight. It's you can say like it's sunshine after that. Yeah.
So Pawan, how many years into your first customer? How many years into your first paid customer when you started?
Yeah, I think it will be for any launch company, it would be minimum 3.5 to 4 years to get the first customer. Yeah.
You're building something without even without even being assured of a customer, you're spending 3 to 4 years of your life.
Yeah.
Am I right in understanding?
Yeah. So no, we are spending 3-4 years of life because we are sure that we're going to get customers after 4 years. So that's why we are spending that much time and money into it. And also we're spending that much time and money into it because we know that, we're going to be internationally competitive. We're going to take things to the next level and also, help India. It's more like, for us, it's more like also nation building, So it's a nation building exercise for us. So overall, so I should say, it's 3-4 years is pretty small for what we do. Yeah.
Chaitanya, your comments on that?
Yes. So funding is a necessary part of being in space, and you do need someone who is patient enough and understands or has passion for what you're doing to be your investor out there. And on top of it, at least in our case, because we are going step by step, establishing a few things, getting some kind of a revenue for part of our offering, if not the whole offering, and trying to generate that. So like I mentioned earlier, we are building some of the satellite subsystems, which by themselves have some kind of a customer base. So ultimately, our dream or like the major business we are looking at is in the satellite manufacturing, but subsystem is a way to that. So yes, and of course, there's a lot of grants that can support in your development. So
Okay.
you might need to not just look within India, but also everywhere. And
Mhm.
finally, we have great ecosystem over here. So we have built ISRO has managed to send a whole mission to Mars at a cost that's cheaper than the movie Martian, right? So you utilize that ecosystem, try to find partners who could help you in your journey. And yeah, and it's a lot about collaboration, especially within the industry right now. So that's something that's
Sure.
needed.
So Chaitanya, how many years into your first customer, paying customer?
So for me, technically, my first paying customer since I joined Dhruva Space is 1.5 year.
Okay.
But you look at the journey, even I would say 3 to 4 years over there.
Okay, sure. I think
So
that's helpful, Pawan and Chaitanya. Thank you so much. Really appreciate your spirit, to in your effort towards nation building and towards something that is remarkably difficult and something that is very high tech and at the same time requires a lot of persistence. So thank you so much for joining us and sharing your learnings with us.